tonight, the plans to bring Alex Salmond's body home. The Scottish Government is in talks with Number 10 after the former First Minister's death following a heart attack in the Balkans at the weekend.
He changed history. Let's be clear about that. Very few people who come here actually change history. You know, he did more to change history than quite a few prime ministers of the last few decades.
We'll have the latest from North Macedonia and reaction from Holyrood and Westminster. Also making the headlines, a fare rise on Calmac. The Scottish Government is hiking ticket prices by 10% on the ailing West Coast ferry fleet. 4 years of construction work across Glasgow city centre, but the council says the disruption will be worth it. And in sport, Steve Clarke believes his Scotland side can upset the odds at Hampden against Portugal tomorrow. I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh. And I'm Emma Cameron in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. The family and friends of Alex Salmond are urging the UK government to help bring home his body from the Balkans. STV News understands the Scottish Government is in talks with Number 10 amid calls for the RAF to offer assistance. The former First Minister died from a heart attack at a hotel in North Macedonia on Saturday afternoon. Friends and foes from across the political spectrum are continuing to pay tribute. A book of condolence is available at Holyrood. Our political reporter Laura Alderman has more.
This is the lakeside city of Ohrid in North Macedonia, where Alex Salmond can be seen at a political conference just hours before he collapsed. Medics fought in vain to save the 69-year-old's life. Local police have spoken to STV News about what happened.
A 69-year-old foreign national from Scotland became ill during a forum held at a hotel in Ohrid and tragically passed away at the scene. An investigation team consisting of the public prosecutor, medical personnel and officers from the Ministry of Internal Affairs in Ohrid was assembled. No signs of violence were detected, and the public prosecutor ordered the body to be sent for autopsy.
As the only former First Minister to die abroad, there's no protocol for returning his body to Scotland. His family and friends are urgently seeking help to get him home.
Today, Kate Forbes, the Deputy First Minister of Scotland, is meeting with the United Kingdom Government to press the case for the UK Government to support the repatriation. I'm hopeful that Miss Forbes will have a productive outcome from that meeting, and the UK Government will do the right thing and step in and send an RAF jet over here to North Macedonia to repatriate Mr Salmond home to Scotland, to his family, where he belongs. Alec had been in what I would class as the form of his life, and those that I have spoken to that were at the conference said that he was in such high spirits.
If I say anything wrong, then I will not be buying lunch for lots of people. I'm Scottish after all, we don't do these sort of things.
This speech delivered to the conference on Friday was his last.
He spoke to the youth with such energy and enthusiasm. Many young people who had studied in Scotland attended the forum just to hear him speak. From that moment, it was clear what kind of person he was. More than just a great orator, but someone with deep empathy who knew how to engage and connect.
In Inverurie in Aberdeenshire, an area Alex Salmond represented in his political life, locals are still processing the news.
Well, I think probably all of them would be shocked. It can't have been so sudden.
His life work was promoting independence, so I think it's definitely a sad day for Scotland, whether you agree with independence or not.
I
maybe didn't support him myself, but I think it is sad, yes.
I live not far from Strichen, and you used to see him in Tariff, and he was a nice man, a very nice man.
I think he's done a lot of good, but I was not a fan of his.
The House will wish to take a moment to remember our former colleague, Alex Salmond.
At Westminster, where Alex Salmond was first elected in 1987, the House paid tribute.
Well, Alex gave all of us in the SNP the belief that what we felt in our hearts was worth fighting for, that the belief that we could one day become an independent nation, and Alex Salmond took us so very close to making that belief a reality.
He sat on the third bench where the leader of the SNP is today during the Scotland Act of 2016, constantly chuntering and bantering directly in my ear every time I stood at that opposition dispatch box. His love of lively discussion extended beyond this chamber, although I will always be keen to keep the topic of our shared passion for Heart of Midlothian Football Club rather than constitutional matters.
Inside the Scottish Parliament, a book of condolence has been set up so the public can leave messages for the former First Minister's family. They described him as a devoted and loving man and a formidable politician, vowing to continue his life's work towards Scottish independence. Laura Alderman, STV News.
Well, at Holyrood, Alex Salmond is being remembered as a former SNP leader who became the party's first to become First Minister. And of course, as a man who delivered the electoral mandate which led to the 2014 independence referendum. Since news broke on Saturday evening, tributes to Alex Salmond have poured in. Well, our political editor, Colin Mackay, is at the Scottish Parliament. Colin, Laura mentioned in her report that a book of condolence has been opened there.
Yeah, there's two books of condolences opened at the Scottish Parliament, one in the public entrance for anyone to sign, and quite a few people have signed that and left messages already today. Now there's a second one in the garden lobby, which is where I usually report from of an evening, and that's really just for MSPs and for staff, and because this place is in recess, there's only been a couple of messages in that so far, but a few people have also left flags and messages and flowers outside the Scottish Parliament. But you know, all of this seems a little bit awkward at times for the SNP. Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon had a monumental falling out, taking them from being the closest of colleagues to effectively wanting to see each other in the jail. So despite Alex Salmond leading the SNP for a total of 20 years, he'd since set up the Alba Party in opposition to them, and all sorts of legal action have been taking place over the last few years, so you can see why it's all a bit awkward. But it's not awkward for someone, for Jim Sillars particularly. He's fallen in and out with Alex Salmond over about 40 years, and he told me today that he believes Alex Salmond was Scotland's best ever First Minister.
You take Donald Dewar. I mean, Donald's a major figure in Scottish politics. You know, the man who made it happen. He came for election. Donald couldn't get a majority because it was designed not to be so. Salmond got a majority. And he achieved the impossible. Then he ran a very good, competent government. Now, Alec was a hard taskmaster. If you talk to some of his ministers, you know, very often they were on the carpet and all the rest of it. But he ran an exceptionally competent administration. And that allowed us, in 2014, to be able to argue, yes, Alex Salmond has proved we can run our own affairs. And that's something the independence movement and the SNP in particular owe to what Alex Salmond managed to accomplish.
Now, the Scottish Parliament is, as I say, off for the next 2 weeks. The First Minister, though, has put down a motion of condolence. I don't think the Parliament is going to be recalled to debate that any time soon. Not certainly until MSPs come back in 2 weeks' time. Now, to be honest, that might be just before the funeral takes place.
OK, Colin, we'll hear more from you later in the programme, but for now, many thanks. Well, Alex Salmond was first elected as an MP to Westminster in 1987. He's being remembered there as a parliamentarian who always made an impact. He last served there as the MP for the Gordon constituency. As we saw earlier, the Commons took time to reflect on his death this afternoon, with the Speaker talking of a deep and lasting legacy. Well, let's cross to Westminster now, and our Westminster correspondent Paris Gurtsayaris. Paris.
Alex Salmond may have done more for Scottish independence than anyone in history, but he's remembered here as a Westminster political animal. And he loved it here because he loved a debate, and the House of Commons may be the greatest theatre of debate anywhere in the world. Now, there were tributes earlier in the Commons chamber. Outside the chamber, I caught up with two men who he was particularly close to here at Westminster. You might be surprised that he struck up those friendships with Conservative MPs, but then he was someone who loved an argument.
I met him quite early on. He looked at me suspiciously and he said, "You're not just a right-winger, you're a rabid right-winger." But there was a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face. Alex was nothing if not combative, a disputant, itching for the fight, for the struggle, for the attempted conquest of his political opponent. If you mixed with him privately, you knew that he could enjoy a joke, he was a raconteur, he was also good at listening to other people's stories as well as telling his own.
We enjoyed arguing with each other, that was fun, you know, and he'd tease me and vice versa. He was brave, he was energetic, he would take anybody on, in public or private, any institution on. I learned more about the heroes of Scotland who I would never hear in any other circumstance from him. So you know, when you have a debate with a well-educated man, you always come away a better man. He changed history. Let's be clear about that. Very few people who come here actually change history. You know, he did more to change history than quite a few prime ministers of the last few decades.
Now, it was in his final years as an MP and afterwards when he launched a TV programme for the Russian channel RT that Alex Salmond's relationship with Nicola Sturgeon began to break down and his reputation suffered. But it remains the case that he'll go down as the greatest Scottish nationalist ever to sit at Westminster. In fact, John Burko told me he deserves to be remembered as one of the best orators, the best debaters ever to serve as an MP.
All right, Paris from Westminster, thank you.
Of course, through the decades, the northeast of Scotland was Alex Salmond's political home. He represented seats in the region for 30 years. Well, Stephen Brown is in Strichen in Aberdeenshire for us this evening. Stephen, you've spent a day there. What's the mood like?
Well, I think there is a sense of shock at the suddenness of Alex Salmond's death. After all, this is the place that he called home through most of his political career. In fact, his home is not far away from where I'm standing now, and over the course of the last few days, floral tributes have been left at the gates there next to the Yes flag and sign, a recognition of the cause that, of course, he fought his entire political life for. It was in 1987 that he was first elected as the MP for Banff and Buchan and represented that seat until 2010, and over the course of the decades, he would represent this area and neighbouring communities as both an MP and MSP, and of course as First Minister. And his former Chief of Staff amongst those paying tribute to Alex Salmond's contribution to Scottish political life.
I think he certainly had made a huge mark in Scotland's politics. He took the country to the brink of independence, which is what his stated ambition was to do, and that took a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and let's be clear, there was a big and strong team behind him doing that, but it wouldn't have been possible without him.
Well, I think it's important that when you speak to people here in the village that it's fair to say that not everyone agreed with Alex Salmond's political views or how he went about things all the time, but he does also have a great deal of support, particularly for what he did as a local representative. And I think, you know, that while he might be well known around Scottish and UK politics, of course it was here in the northeast that he started and ended his parliamentary political career. And some suggestions on social media from people here about how this local community might try and remember their former local representative and of course their neighbour too.
Stephen in Strichen, many thanks for that.
Well, let's go back to Colin at Holyrood. And Colin, you'll be back with more on Scotland Tonight here on STV at 10:40 this evening. But for now, what are your reflections?
You know, Alex Salmond was a huge Burns fan and he never missed an opportunity to quote the bard. And one of the quotes that I heard him use more often than any other was that facts are cheels that win a ding. Now, what that means is that the facts are the facts and can't be changed. So yes, there will be, I think, many people who feel that Alex Salmond's memory has been a bit tainted by all the allegations, the court cases and the rows over the last few years. But he led the SNP into government for the first time ever in 2007, and he delivered in that government. Free university tuition, free prescriptions, that kind of thing. That enabled him to take the SNP into the first ever majority government in this parliament. That was never supposed to be allowed to happen under the Holyrood voting system, and through that he delivered an independence referendum in 2014. So yes, his memory may have been tainted for many, many people, but his political legacy will stand the test of history. Now, when he resigned as First Minister in 2014 after the referendum, he said the dream shall never die, and the dream doesn't die with him because the independence movement is much, much bigger than him. He described that referendum as a once-in-a-generation event. Now, looking back on his life and hearing the tributes that have been paid to him over the last few days, what is clear is that Alex Salmond was a once-in-a-generation politician.
Indeed. All right, Colin, with your thoughts and reflections, thank you.
Well, to the rest of the day's news now, and the Scottish Government is putting up fares on Calmac ferries. That's despite the endless issues with the operator's ailing fleet. Passengers will see them hike in prices from the new year.
The latest deadline for the delivery of the hugely delayed MV Glensannox, but instead that deadline has been pushed back again. Well, Caitlin Hutchison is in Port Glasgow for us. Caitlin, let's talk about the fares rises first. What sort of price hikes are we talking about?
Well, the Scottish Government has said today that effectively it needs to increase fares by around 10% from next year across Scotland because the current fares freeze that's in place is just too costly to keep in place in the current financial climate. But this rise, which comes into effect from the beginning of January for the Northern Isles network and the end of March for the West, comes at a time when across Scotland the network is facing regular disruption. And for locals who are in the worst hit areas, most problem areas, paying more for a service they already find unreliable will be a bitter pill to swallow.
Paying 10% more for a lack of service, where the boats aren't running regular, sometimes they're not sailing from Ardrossan at all, and the inconvenience folk are having, extra costs for islanders if they're having to come over and stay here. It can be a lack of communication with the local area about what is actually happening. So just to hear they're increasing the prices is it's a joke.
It's just shocking. It will affect people, coming back and forth for working and stuff like that. That'll be really hit their pockets,
Well, I don't think they'll stop using it because Mogport's a very, very busy place.
I think it's a bit high for the people who live in the islands. For us it's probably okay, but for them it's probably a bit high.
OK, so fares are going up and further delays. Any idea, Caitlin, on when the Glensannox will be handed over?
Well, yes, that's right. We continue to wait for the delivery of the hugely delayed Glensannox. That, along with the Glen Rosa you can see behind me, those are the two vessels currently being built by Ferguson Marine, both hugely delayed, both hugely over budget. And today was actually supposed to be that crucial deadline for the handover of the Glensannox, that revised deadline. And once again, that deadline has come and gone. Ferguson Marine says its sea trials last week went well, largely successful, but work will continue and they'll aim to provide a date just as soon as it is confirmed. Some good news for anyone trying to get on and off of Arran, though. Just in the last hour or so, we've heard that the MV Hebridean Isles has been fixed again after breaking down, and it will resume sailings between Brodick and Ardrossan from 7 o'clock tonight. Kellyanne.
All right, Caitlin, with the latest, thank you.
Now, police are looking for potential witnesses after a teenager was struck by a car in Glasgow at the weekend. The 18-year-old man is currently in a critical condition in Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital after being hit while walking on a footpath in the city's Maryhill Road on Saturday night. Now, construction work to improve Glasgow city centre is to continue for at least another 4 years. George Square and other major surrounding streets in the city will be shut down at various points during the works. Glasgow City Council says its so-called Avenues programme will provide the biggest transformation to the city for half a century, as Raheem Tam now reports.
Glasgow city centre is constantly changing, and now it's set for another revamp. In a bid to modernise the area, major streets will become construction sites across the second half of this decade.
Shambles. It's a bit of a mess just now, isn't it? With all the building works and repairs and everything that's going on. But it's a shame because there are parts that have been gentrified and look a bit better, but in the main it's
It's pretty sad.
It's nice to revamp the place, certainly is, but I think there's so much else that they could be doing with the money just now.
You'd be better to get a few business people in to get involved, to plan it, and contractors that know what they're doing. Not city council or governments, they don't have a clue, sorry. Maybe someone like Alan Sugar.
Summertime comes around, maybe nowhere to sit.
Glasgow City Council is currently focused on improving Sauchiehall Street. Next year, work on 14 separate avenue projects begins. This includes George Square, which will close to pedestrians for almost 2 years from early next year. The east end of Argyle Street will also be upgraded during this time. In 2027, work will continue on the Broomielaw and Clyde side. The council says all projects will finish in 2028. This Greek restaurant in George Square is worried about accessibility.
What I'm worried about is the scale of the construction and the time, if the timeline is being kept. As you can see, I'm the only business. I have a straight and only access to George Square. Other businesses have West Nile Street, they have access to everywhere. We're expecting up to 30% less business. And that's optimistic.
The council says the plans will make the streets more welcoming to cyclists and pedestrians and help meet the city's environmental goals.
A range of streets right across the city centre are going to see significant upgrades. They're going to see additional greenery, hundreds of new trees planted in the city centre, new public realms, so upgraded pavements, active travel infrastructure in there as well, and basic things like improved lighting and drainage as well. So right through a number of key streets in the city centre we will have that investment taking place.
The bill for all this is pegged at £135 million. When the Commonwealth Games comes to Glasgow in 2 years' time, George Square will be a building site. The council hopes the long-term benefits of the transformation will make it a price worth paying. But for local businesses, it sure will be a tricky time. Raheem Cham, STV News, Glasgow.
All right, let's get a sport now with Jamie.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Autumn Sale.
Good evening. Hearts are closing in on a new head coach with former Blackpool boss Neil Critchley in Edinburgh for talks. Critchley was sacked from his second spell in charge of Blackpool in August, and he could take over in time for this weekend's Premiership match against St Mirren. Hearts currently lie bottom of the league with just 2 points from their opening 8 games. Steve Clarke says a win is coming despite his Scotland side only registering 1 victory across their last 15 matches. His confidence ahead of tomorrow's Hampden meeting with Cristiano Ronaldo and Portugal comes after a good performance in the 2-1 Nations League defeat to Croatia in Zagreb. Chris Harvey reports.
Moving on quickly, modern footballers have no time to dwell on disappointment. And at training this morning at Lesser Hampden, it was back to business for Steve Clarke and his Scotland squad. Joining up to replace the injured James Forrest, Connor Barron, the Rangers midfielder leaving the under-21s to help out at Hampden tomorrow night. While the recent record has been very disappointing, Clarke believes just a slight improvement from his players could leverage a big result.
It's really simple. They do believe in themselves. They understand that we're playing difficult opponents. They understand also that the squad could be stronger. Everyone knows that. All these things are there to be seen. I don't speak about it too much because I feel it's disrespectful to the boys that are in the squad. We have to concentrate on who we have here. And we have to go out against Portugal, and we know we have to be very good at everything we do in the game, and hopefully we can get the result that might just change the whole mood about the place.
Teams have been really positive. I think I think we've not got the rub of green in some cases, like my 1 yard offside, the other just impact your whole mentality a lot. So I think tomorrow's another chance to come up against one of the best nations in the world. Some would say so. We're looking forward to that.
Scotland are the lowest ranked team in Nations League A, so a run of defeats shouldn't be a major surprise. But Scotland will win again, and what better occasion to do it than in front of a full house at Hampden against Portugal, one of the best teams in the world. Chris Harvey, STV Sport.
Scotland women's head coach Pedro Martinez-Losa is totally convinced his side can navigate their upcoming playoff ties and qualify for Euro 2025. Scotland failed to make last year's World Cup, losing to Ireland in a playoff, but Losa is confident he can make amends and qualify for next year's Euros in Switzerland. And that's all your sport for this evening.
STV Sport, sponsored by the C.R. Smith Autumn Sale.
Now Sean's here with the weather forecast.
A dry start to the day will become increasingly splashy. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Good evening. Well, it's been a lovely day out there today, hasn't it? Plenty of crisp sunshine, a wee bit more cloud in the far northwest, Ardnamurchan, Mull, Col, Tiree, and a few light showers earlier on the day. But for many of us, through this evening, dry, clear, cold, although temperatures picking up a little bit later on, more of a breeze coming in. A strong southerly airflow developing by Wednesday. It will be a lot milder, but with weather fronts coming in from the west, there's a lot of rain to come as well. So some big changes coming in this week. Fingers crossed, there are some hints towards the end of the month into the start of November that we're looking at a quiet spell and a cold and frosty spell as well. Now, cold tonight, temperatures, as I say, 2-3 degrees Celsius, so a touch of frost in some spots, especially across parts of Lanarkshire, Stirlingshire and all later on the night. Now, we'll also start to see a bit more cloud spreading into the far west by the end of the night as well, and we could see a few light showers tomorrow morning, just coming in across Renfrewshire, Glasgow, Ayrshire and also Argyll and Bute, but they'll be very scattered for most of us tomorrow. A lot of dry weather, albeit rather cloudy. The best of the sunshine tomorrow, probably around parts of Stirlingshire and also across the Highlands where the cloud will be broken up. But for most of us, a cloudier day tomorrow, but still largely dry. Then we see the big change on Wednesday. A lot milder though, 16 degrees Celsius, but we'll see some very wet weather around. Thursday, it's back to sunshine and showers, more rain coming in on Friday. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Don't forget, Colin will bring you Scotland Tonight at 10:40, reflecting on the life and legacy of Alex Salmond.
That's all from us tonight. Good night.
Good night.